So it is Saturday night, and this is Joe Firestone for Real Progressives. As usual, my guest for tonight is Jenny Marshall, who is running for Congress in the North Carolina 5th, if I recall correctly, and she is running for the nomination of the Democratic Party, and she's running against Virginia Foxx, one of the most nasty and cruel people in the House in living memory. So she herself has a platform which is very, very progressive. And she's going to start off by telling us about the context of the race, how she's doing, and the challenges she faces. And after doing that for a few minutes, we'll move right into her platform, and you'll be able to see how great it is. Okay, Jenny.
All right.
Tell us about the context of the interview.
Well, we are in North Carolina's 5th Congressional District. It is 11 counties, 3,500 square miles of territory. We are basically an urban, suburban, and rural district all rolled into one. We have one urban city center, that's Winston-Salem. We have at least 4 colleges. We have every county has its own community college, but we have 4 major universities. And the vast majority of the district, as far as territory goes, is rural, because we have just a large range that goes all the way to Appalachia. So we need to make sure that we can get out the vote, that we have a strong platform, and that's what we have been doing for the past 14 plus months, really reaching out to the voters in the 5th District, telling them that there's a viable option, telling them that there's somebody here who really wants to be a people's representative. Virginia Foxx has taken $3.5 million worth of corporate PAC money and corporate interest lobby money. So we know that she does not have the best interests of the people here in the 5th District. I was a public school teacher and decided that I'd had enough of her bought and paid for behavior in Congress, and that we needed somebody that could go into the urban city center, the suburban center, or the suburban area around Winston-Salem, and the rural areas, and really speak to the people there and show them that there is a better, more viable choice.
Okay, well, thank you very much for the introduction. Okay, and so now let's move into the platform.
Mm-hmm.
The first item on your platform is jobs and the economy.
Right.
But could you tell us what you favor there, please?
Well, obviously, when we're talking about jobs in the economy, we're not just talking about any old jobs. We're talking about good paying jobs, jobs that pay them what I think needs to be the minimum wage of $15 an hour. We need to raise the minimum wage. We need to tie it to inflation, and we need to stop having people work 40 hours a week and still live in poverty. The United States poverty level is about 12 point something percent. North Carolina is 14.4%, but the 5th District is 17.7%. But in some areas of our district, it's over 26%, and that's simply unacceptable. Bad trade deals have taken jobs out of this country, and especially in North Carolina with textiles. The furniture industry left, and it really left a big hole in the 5th District and in North Carolina especially, and we have yet to fill those with decent paying jobs. And that's what people are struggling with here in and around the district and across this country. So we need to make sure that we raise the minimum wage. We're making sure that we take care of people as far as protecting workers' rights and promoting the ability to unionize. and we need to make sure that we are really helping small businesses thrive. Small businesses are the backbone of this country, and they're oftentimes overlooked as far as resources go. And we need to make sure that we're helping those businesses survive past that 5-year mark.
Okay. So let me ask you, there are ideas circulating now and becoming extremely popular, essentially polling, I guess, at now 70%, okay, in terms of the approval rating across the country, with respect to something known as a federal job guarantee, just job guarantee. And but Bernie Sanders is about to come out with a plan for that. Okay, I'm not sure whether he announced one as yet, because I didn't check the site but today to find out. But it is supposed to be momentarily here in full detail. And but Cory Booker has recently talked about a pilot program for this. And the Center for American Progress, essentially Hillary Clinton's center, has also forwarded a proposal for a job guarantee, okay, at some point. There are a number of different proposals for job guarantees out there. I forgot also Senator Gillibrand has a proposal she is circulating as well. So there are a variety of such proposals which are circulating, okay, or which are about to circulate. The program I am most familiar with is the job guarantee program that is coming out of the Levy Institute. Is being constructed by Pavlina Chernyeva, Stephanie Kelton, Scott Fulweiler, Flavia Dantes, and Randy Ray. And they're putting together a program that has 25 years of research behind it. And there are also ideas feeding into this program from Sandy Darity and Derek Hamilton and Mark Paul, okay, as well. I believe Mark Paul is a professor at Duke, okay, if I recall correctly. In any case, these programs call for a job guarantee at a living wage.
Right.
And call for the programs to be devoted to public purpose. And what is meant by public purpose, okay, in this instance, is that the local communities all over the country will be deciding on what the public needs in each of the local areas. And that will be decided by a group of stakeholders, okay, within the local areas. In the Levy program, the job guarantee participants themselves will have a hand in defining their jobs. These will be living wage jobs. The Sanders proposal is said to be coming out with a $15 per hour wage. But there are many people who feel that that wage is not really a living wage in most of the country, okay, at least in very much of the country. And there are many people who think that there should be a cost-adjusted living wage. Okay, in other words, actually geared to the differences in the CPI, okay, in each of the areas of the country, okay, in order to make it truly a living wage, okay, for each of the areas. And so that's basically the idea. If we go into details, it can get really interesting because it provides scope for all kinds of nonprofit enterprises producing social value to be created. Some people are envisioning that there would be many cooperative enterprises that would be created through the JG program. One key factor is that while the local authorities would be defining the jobs, the JG program would be funded by the federal government. Mm-hmm. And the cost estimates for this, depending on the characteristics, depending on the characteristics of the programs, would be anywhere from, let's say, $550 billion a year to as high as $1 trillion a year to start with. Mm-hmm. Now, what is envisioned, okay, is that once all the people who want jobs can have them, some people actually say that there are 24 million people who still would like to have jobs out there, not the 8 million that are estimated in terms of the U3 statistics. Okay, but anyway, when the program takes hold, it's thought that the private sector will begin to boom, and it will hire back people off the job guarantee program, so that the cost of the program will begin to go down until finally, okay, it levels off at perhaps $250 billion a year. Mm-hmm. It becomes purely a transitional job type of program. So, what are your thoughts about that kind of a proposal?
Well, I've actually spoken to Pavlina about her job guarantee. I spoke to her several months ago. She sent me her work, several white papers on the issue, and I kind of just went through them at a very high level because obviously I'm trying to be very well-rounded in the scope of what all Congress is going to be tackling in the 116th. But I like the idea. As a history teacher, as a history student for life, I look at FDR's programs where he really put people back to work doing things that needed to be done for this country, and also provided people an escape out of the recession, the Great Depression. Obviously FDR's programs didn't go far enough because it still had people left behind. But we need to make sure that when people are unemployed, underemployed, dropped off the rolls, because like in North Carolina, we only have 20 weeks of unemployment. And when you get done with that, you are no longer calculated in the unemployment totals that they like to use. So we need to make sure everyone has a job. And I love the idea that they are doing jobs that benefit our communities, that strengthen the way that we work, the way that we communicate with each other, the way that we have resources available, not only in places like homeless shelters, because Pavlina was talking to me about like homeless shelters, soup kitchens, places where the poor would be congregating or people in need would be congregating, but also, really working for, say, our federal park systems and clearing brush. I've talked to many of the of the forest rangers, and they are severely understaffed. Their budgets have been cut underneath Trump, and we need to make sure that those things are taken care of, because these are just a tinderbox waiting to happen when we don't take care of trails, when we don't take care of our parks, and we don't remove the brush, the underbrush that can lead to forest fires. So when we're talking about the Appalachian Range, we're talking about a lot of places that need help. Repairing buildings, doing infrastructure work. All of these things are public service and public goods. And I love the idea that we're providing people a legitimate source of income that makes them feel good about themselves, that empowers them in their community, and puts people back to work.
And also, not only does that, but it also opens up the communities again.
Mm-hmm.
Creates an economy, in the communities again,
yes.
where there was very little before.
Yes, absolutely. And it helps people to connect with other people, and I think that's an important aspect of it. Not just the monetary part of it, but the fact that people have self-esteem and they have that intrinsic motivation to get up and do good every single day, and they're getting a paycheck. So, that just speaks volumes to me.
Yeah, really marvelous, isn't it?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Now, can we put people in Congress that will actually do that for our communities? That's the question.
Well, but the first question is, can we put you in Congress?
Yeah.
So you introduce a bill like this and push for it in Congress. Okay, I think actually there are a number of people running from coast to coast on the idea of a job guarantee right now.
Right.
Who would push a proposal like this if it got to Congress.
Mm-hmm.
I want to emphasize also one other thing about it, and that is that, as I said, there are proposals that are extremely different. There's the Cory Booker proposal, pilot study. This strikes me as a clear neoliberal tactic to try to delay the passing of the job guarantee. Now, it sounds like a very rational thing to do, but at the same time, if you're going to go with a pilot and use your political capital to pass a pilot, you're not going to deliver for most of the people, because you have to wait for the pilot to be over, then you have to wait for the evaluation of the pilot, and then you have to build up a movement to pass the job guarantee again. So it seems to me this is almost a typical kind of, of a neoliberal diversion in order to prevent a progressive type of program from passing. Some of the other proposals also conceive of a living wage at far lower than $15 an hour. They think in terms of $10 an hour wage, which certainly is not a living wage, or a $12 an hour wage, which still, is not a living wage.
Right.
The job guarantee wage would constitute a de facto minimum.
Absolutely.
So therefore, if we want it to be a minimum wage, we have to make that a living wage, or we won't have a minimum wage, which is a living wage, which is our problem right now. That the minimum wage we have is not a living wage. People have to get 2, and 3 jobs. And, so all the programs with that.
Right.
But what's on your platform is basically getting the American private sector to move again. And you talk about changing trade agreements. Well, even if we were to conclude trade agreements for public purpose, as I like to think of them, but such agreements would take a few years to change anything.
Yeah.
First of all, it would probably take a year or 2 to negotiate those kinds of agreements. But then you'd probably have to wait 3 or 4 years until it has an effect on capital investment.
Yes.
And starting new businesses. So that's a long-term solution.
Yes.
Okay. And it's also a problematic one, okay, in any case. And the reason why is that the businesses that are created to try to do well in the trading sphere may not actually do that well. And so there's the case of the interim period where people are still going without any jobs.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not a viable political situation for progressive candidates
Mm-hmm.
who are promising people results when they get into office. And of course, it's not a viable situation for the people who don't have any jobs.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it seems to me the trade agreement solution is at best a long-term solution.
Yeah. Well, obviously, you need to have both on a platform, short-term, immediate things that you can do, and then long-term fixes, because you just can't keep putting Band-Aids on things and adjusting here and trying to tweak this up here. You really need to make sure that we are kind of reversing the wrongs that we did early on.
Yes.
But some of these things are going to take maybe decades to really correct and to kind of get moving in the right direction. It's not a quick turn of the sail.
That's right. And that's another reason why the job guarantee program is so important, because
Mm-hmm.
that brings some consumption power into
Right.
economies that have been depressed, and that attracts businesses quickly.
Right. Yeah. Along with, I also agree with raising the minimum wage, which is, if we could get that passed in the 116th, would be an immediate about $1.25 right off the bat, which doesn't help right away, but after 2 or 3 years, it's moving people out of poverty, and hopefully we can, keep moving that in the right direction.
Yeah, whatever we can do in the short term, okay, is going to be good.
Yeah, expand social safety nets, up income limits. I'm all for doing those things to make sure that, we're not giving people $1 and then that dollar is taken back out because they are lost social safety net programs.
Okay, so you mentioned the training solution. Expansion, okay, of education programs to train people.
Right.
Okay. That's actually a part of the job guarantee program. Okay, that people would be able to get training as part of the job guarantee program.
Right.
And so really the job guarantee program actually covers that. Okay, but if we don't get the job guarantee program through, then we have the normal problem with training programs, which is we train people to acquire skills to do jobs, and then the jobs are not there.
Right.
Okay, and that's been a long-term kind of problem. Everybody mentions the training for new skills, but historically, it doesn't seem to have worked extremely well. That kind of solution. You mentioned the currency manipulation problem. Okay, I wonder what you had in mind. Like, for example, the case which is often mentioned is China.
Right.
Okay, that China is, manipulating the currency. But as far as I can see, what China is doing is pegging its currency to the dollar. As I understand it, the way international trade actually works, for the most part, is that there are very few countries that are floating the value of their currency. And most countries, in fact, or many countries anyway, are pegging their currencies to the dollar. So when the dollar goes up, their currency goes up. When it goes down, it goes down. So what I wonder about is whether China is really doing anything more than that.
Well, from my understanding, what they're doing is like artificially inflating their currency so that they're not ever losing when any kind of adjustments happen. And of course, I'm not an expert on this. Was relying on other people, experts, when we wrote the platform. And to be honest, nobody's ever asked me about it. So you are the first person that's ever asked me about that part of the platform. But I do know that there are several members of Congress that have raised this as a significant issue. I think
They've
Mark
been
Pocan.
raising it for years and years, okay, and years,
Right.
but I still haven't heard anybody explain what China is doing differently, other than simply seeing to it that their currency floats against the dollar.
Mm-hmm.
The reason why I raise that point is because scores of countries are doing that,
Right.
not simply China. And I don't believe it's considered to be a manipulation of the currency.
Mm-hmm.
So that I think that issue is more rhetoric, actually, than anything else.
Could be. Could be. I mean, it's one of those things that obviously I can't be an expert in everything, so I'm just trying to do as much as I possibly can with the information that we have. But it seemed to be a valid complaint, and with China being one of our largest trade partners, it's important for us to make sure that we have, kind of a level playing field when it comes down to, trading back and forth. I mean, we have corporations here in the United States that purposely build things in other countries only to bring them back to the United States and increase their value. I mean, it's
I
everybody.
absolutely agree with that, but that's not a manipulation of the currency issue. That's a separate
No,
issue.
but it's a kind of a tandem issue of like how you can manipulate the system in order to get the most gain. And I think that that's where we need to stop everyone from gaming the system and then just get rules and laws and agreements that really make it fair to both sides rather than somebody's just trying to get one over on you all the time.
I completely agree with that. Okay, but what I want to do is to be conceptually clear about what's involved, whether it is a manipulation of the currency or whether it's the gaming of the system, okay, in another way. I tend to think that there is a severe gaming of the system, okay, that's going on, but that what it has to do with is giving tax breaks to companies here to move overseas. That kind of thing has been going on for years.
Right.
Okay. And
virtual inventories, the whole 9 yards. We really need to take a look at all of that. And that's something that, frankly, I'm willing to do is to look at all of those things myself and rather than rely on other people. But it's a lot to try to understand. And, I think perhaps, I might need a degree in economics when I'm all done to really understand it all. So I think that's when you surround yourself with the best experts in the field and do a little bit of deferring to them. But, I try my best.
Yeah, we all do. I think, though, the experts also have ideological biases, okay, of one sort or another. And that does influence the kinds of views they express to politicians.
Right.
So you have to be very, very careful who you select as your expert. And you probably have to have a number, okay, of different kinds, and then to them off and be critical yourself in terms of what they say.
Yes.
All that is probably necessary. So I wanted to leave you with a final thought on the trade aspect of the economy. When people send their goods over here, okay, when they export, okay, they're sending us something real. Their goods.
Mm-hmm.
When we pay them for their goods, what we're giving them is essentially reserves.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, in other words, changes in account balances that our government is able to create by the orders of Congress.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, that is ultimately the situation. Yes, we're sending essentially money
Mm-hmm.
to the people we're buying the goods from.
Right.
But money is something we create these days with keystrokes.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they're sending us something real, and we're sending them keystrokes.
I use written on paper. Yes.
The question is, who's getting the better of that particular deal? Actually, Warren Mosler gives the example, okay, in one of his books, in the 7 deadly innocent frauds. He talks about the Japanese case and said that if we had ended the Second World War on terms that would have forced the Japanese to send the volume of goods that they have sent us in return for our currency, everybody would have thought that that was a draconian peace imposed on Japan. And yet, that's what they have actually voluntarily done over the years. Sent us all kinds of goods to make us, to increase the real wealth of Americans over the years. And what we've sent them is our paper, okay, and our keystrokes.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So as people who work, it was not a very good deal. People who consume, okay, it was a very good deal.
Sure.
But we are not one or the other, we are both. Okay, so the point is, if we can create some other jobs here that fulfill public purposes here and create things that that we need here, mm-hmm. and they still want to continue the trading relationships such that they manufacture our toys and they manufacture cards and they manufacture various other things that are not absolutely essential to us in terms of actually producing value. Mm-hmm. And that frees up the time of Americans to produce socially valuable outcomes that only we can produce, because it always has to involve our time, okay, and our labor. Then we have to ask ourselves the question, aren't we better off if they want to continue these arrangements? Okay, now I'm not really making that as an entirely comprehensive argument because, of course, for various reasons, for example, national security reasons, mm-hmm. it may be important that we manufacture certain things over here and that we maintain the skills and the technology to manufacture those things. And there may be other leading edge technologies that it's very much in the national interest for us to be leading in. Okay, so mm-hmm. I don't want to make this as an entirely general point. All I want to do is present it as something to think of, okay, an argument to think of.
Right.
there's real value coming here. There are keystrokes, okay, that are going there.
Sure.
Okay. So there's a short run and long run issue there too. So you say a lot about small businesses on your platform.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I agree. Small businesses are extremely important. And you also point out that small businesses need credit. And they need the credit on favorable terms. And the paperwork has to be easy to get through for small businesses to thrive. And you make the point that was it 50% of small businesses that go broke in 5 years? I've heard statistics like 90% of them go broke in 7 years, something like that.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's bad.
Yes, it is really bad. And as someone who had a small business for some years, I have personal experience that it can be very bad. Okay. And so I have a specific question. How about having state banks like the North Dakota State Bank
Sure.
to fund small businesses?
Absolutely. I love the idea of state-run banks. They are there solely to empower their state, invest back into their state rather than having stockholders to pay and large CEOs to pay. You really are reinvesting those dollars back into the community. So I like the idea of that. I like the fact that North Dakota's bank has been around for going on a decade now, wasn't it? Like,
it's been around since 1912, I believe.
Yeah. So here it is, a success story. Weathered the storms of up and down economies throughout the last decade. But when it comes down to it, we need to make sure that businesses, small businesses, and people who want to go into business themselves know how to write a business plan, know what it takes. And so that's an education level almost at 100 years. So we need to make sure that people know how to write a business plan, that they know what it's going to take to actually run a business, how to buy advertising, just really those things while they're pursuing the option to have capital.
Yes.
And if it's, bricks and mortar capital, or if it's, not, we need to make sure that they understand what's it really going to take to run that small business. Lots of people went in to business, in restaurants, and they get completely upside down because they have no idea what it takes to run a business. Yes. And we need to make sure that people are educated and that capital goes towards the things that really are going to build the business and not just be a money pit. And I think that's one of the things that oftentimes we don't really realize. We think we're good at something, therefore we can be a business owner, and they don't realize what it really takes to do all the small tasks that really are the key things that hold your business together. Making sure that your taxes are done on time, making sure you understand payroll, making sure that you understand workers' rights. So all of that stuff, and having state-run agencies that are really accessible to teach people how to do these things, or to be a place where those things can get done at low or no cost. Because if we want small businesses to survive, they're already running razor thin margins. Yes, they can't afford to go to the big lawyers. They can't afford the big accounting firms. They can't afford all this stuff. They need to have those kinds of services to be that buffer. Maybe even for the first 10 years, you get to go to X, Y, and Z state-run agency to get your taxes done. You get to go to statewide agency X, Y, and Z to get, to walk through your business plan, or to, have access to an attorney, those kinds of things that really, SCORE really helps. But we need to expand those because it's so hard to get into those programs.
Absolutely.
We need to make sure that we are really doing the best that we can do for the people who live here.
Right. And by the way, that's another area in which the job guarantee program can help.
Mm-hmm.
Because depending upon how the local communities define the jobs in the job guarantee program, there may be a place for entrepreneurs who want to produce something of social value.
Yes.
To be supported by the job guarantee programs. In other words, have the bill for the employees of these social ventures actually paid for by the federal government. And then people who are running the ventures, of course, okay, in order to get approved and also to get grants for expenses of the business, would have to be able to write a business plan.
Right.
So that the job guarantee programs then might provide training for people also in how to write a business plan and how to join together, okay, with other people to create a social value business, okay, and then that would then give them training, which they could later use to start private sector small businesses as well. They can be a carryover, okay, between these two things.
Mm-hmm.
So, moving to Medicare and Social Security. Say something on those, please.
Well, obviously, I think we need to expand Social Security. We need to include expanding and then eventually getting rid of the cap, making sure that we have the resources available to make sure that our senior citizens' checks are larger and not smaller every year. I mean, I know we have the cost of living. I know we have the cost of living, but every time we have a cost of living adjustment, it seems like Medicare just sucks most of that up.
It does. Okay.
Yeah.
In fact, it sucks it all up. And also the COLA for Social Security isn't a realistic one because it doesn't actually take into account the rise in the medical costs.
Right.
Each year. So another cost of living index, which the Bureau of Labor Statistics has on the shelf, is what should be used for the COLA, as opposed to the current COLA. Okay, but even then, Social Security hasn't really kept pace with the growth of productivity in the economy. So neither in terms of the real inflation, which the older people are experiencing, and also in terms of the productivity rises in the economy, we have extremely stingy pensions here in the United States.
Right.
Compared to some of the European countries, our pensions for seniors are only one half as large.
Right. I mean, and frankly, Social Security is run by Congress, and they could expand it if they wanted to, regardless of the cap. I mean, but that's the terminology that we're all used to. It's something that's easily understood by most people who aren't financially literate on how Social Security really works. And we could expand the program to cover everyone at a living wage. Will we do it? I don't know if we'll have a strong enough Congress to actually get that done. I would like to see us actually get it.
But we certainly will not do it if we don't start to advocate for it.
Absolutely.
Congress.
Yeah,
whether it's
absolutely.
Loudly advocate for it.
Mm-hmm.
You also mentioned raising the cap as if having more tax revenue was actually necessary to pay for increases in Social Security.
No, it's just another way to make sure that, all of our money isn't resting in the hands of the very, very wealthy. It's an alternative way of taxes, frankly. And,
So, but from your point of view, that would be a matter of increasing the taxes paid by the wealthier people, so
Correct.
that they would be paying more of their fair share. In other words,
Right.
it's a fairness issue. It's not actually a payment issue.
Correct. Correct.
That's what I'm hearing.
Now, I think the cap issue is just so that they get out of paying for a fair share of how our country runs, frankly.
Right. Okay. With respect to Medicare, I think you're a supporter, okay, of Medicare for all, aren't you?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Which bill do you favor?
Right now, I favor actually the 676 that's in the House because it's there. But what I would actually like to see more so than trying to create a new program is just expand the income levels, the income limits on Medicaid. Medicaid's a great program. It services all of your health care needs, mental, dental, health care, vision, and frankly, it's a very well-run program that has very low overhead. And if we would just expand the income limits, we could really cover people.
However, the problem with Medicaid has always been that there are many doctors who won't accept people.
Well, that's because we don't reimburse them at a reasonable rate. It's low. It's low hanging fruit. One, you get paid. It's a guaranteed payment when you see a Medicaid patient. But oftentimes those rates of reimbursement are too low. So we need to do both. We need to raise it so everybody's covered, but we also need to make sure that our doctors are being paid for the services that they're providing.
Okay, but under 676, since that would be, well, under 676, the reimbursement rates would be more like they are in the Medicare program.
Right. But I'm just saying we already have an existing program. We could tweak it.
Yeah, but we have an existing Medicare program as well.
But Medicare has supplement plans and deductibles and copays.
Right, but
Medicaid does not.
But HR 676, okay, eliminates those.
Right, but we already have it under Medicaid.
There are no copays.
Right, but I'm just saying we already have one. Why not just tweak it to what HR 676 is trying to accomplish, rather than trying to create a whole new entity? And it's one of those things. I mean, we have an existing program. It runs really well. Fix it, expand it, pay doctors what they're supposed to be paid, underneath Medicare rates. And there you go. It's already in existence. You don't have to fight it through Congress. You just have to tweak the existing program that we have.
Well, you'd have to fight it actually through Congress. And the reason why you'd have to fight it actually through Congress.
Well, I mean, but not an entire new bill, though.
It's sort of defined by Congress as a program for the poor.
Right.
Okay, and what you'd be proposing is to expand the program to everyone. And that's exactly the same thing that 676 is trying to do with respect to the Medicare program. I'm not sure which of the bureaucracies has a greater degree, of efficiency, but the Medicare program is also very efficiently administered and has a very low overhead rate. So that's true for both programs. That the overhead rates, are very good in both. I think the reality is that it's almost a case of the names the programs are actually carrying. And what you and I are talking about is the same actual reality coming out of the legislative change. In other words, we both are talking about a insurance program that would cover everyone. that would have no co-pays, okay, also no deductibles, and would pay for dental care,
Mm-hmm.
and would pay for chiropractic, and would pay for psychiatry, okay, for and any other.
Pregnancy.
Right,
Yep.
exactly. And for any
I
other
don't
services.
think Medicare pays for that right now.
Right. So what we call it in terms of how we label it
Right.
is more a matter of the PR involved. But I think we're agreeing on the reality.
Absolutely. Medicare actually polls better with people than Medicaid. Medicaid has that connotation with poor. Absolutely. But whatever we call it, however we get it done, we need to make sure that we actually have health care that is accessible and that it is at no cost, no additional cost out of pocket for the people to use it. And I
Yes.
think that's the goal that we're trying to get at.
Yes, I think we completely agree on that goal. Okay, going to the education program. You really want to do a lot in the area, okay, of education, including tuition-free colleges and also universities, and refinancing of student loan debt, okay, at the lower interest rates. And then you have a number of other things you want to push for: the elimination of value-added measures for educators, increase in funding before public education, significant reduction in testing, especially in the elementary education classrooms. You want to model the need for teachers' voices in the decision-making process. So you want a more democratic process there.
Mm-hmm.
And you want a reduction of the amount of standardized tests tied to federal dollars.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the main aspects. And you want to end the privatization, of course. That's a very, very important aspect of your program. Okay, so I certainly agree with all this, and I think it's a very, very nice program. Is there anything special that I haven't covered so far that you would like to say about it?
I don't think so. You basically covered it all, and we wanted to definitely make sure that we highlighted education. As a public school teacher, I've been advocating for public education for about the last decade, making sure that we are respecting teachers and their professionalism, that we are funding education, and that we are maintaining quality classrooms for our students and our future, because frankly, education is the way that all of us get from not knowing to knowing, and from not being able to, actually realize our dreams to doing that. So that's why we expanded our whole fully funding education to pre-K all the way through public colleges and universities, because what I say is if we value it, we will fund it. And I think we should really value education. It allows our students who work hard and get good grades to go to college to really become what they are good at, not just what pays the bills. And that is a benefit to our country.
I completely agree with you, completely. Yeah. There's one question, okay, that I want to ask. Your program says refinancing of current student loan debt, okay, at lower interest rates. It seems to me that debt has been so onerous on so many for so many years, and a burden for the economy.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Their regular lives. So, but why not advocate for just wiping away all of the student loan debt?
Well, I've actually started to read the study, the white paper that has come out with Stephanie Kelton,
Yeah,
and it is like this thick. It's about an inch thick, and it's very compelling, the macroeconomic impact on our economy. And so I've been moving towards that direction and actually talking to people about just wiping out the 1.3 to 1.5 trillion, whatever it is now, student loan debt. And the fact that we've already paid that money out and all we're going to be missing is the interest off of that. And it's an investment into ourselves. It's an investment into our future. And I think we need to start doing that more, is investing, because we're going to see that recoup. And while it's not fair for that person that just paid off their last dollar of student loan debt yesterday for us to wipe out student debt tomorrow, at some point in time, we have to make the decision just to do it, just to do what is right for now and the future, rather than saying, well, it was good enough for us, it's good enough for you, just keep lamenting on about student loan debt. We really just need to get it done and over with. And they make a very, very compelling case.
Yes, and, I know. Okay, yeah. And I agree with the case.
Yeah. So it's one of those things that we are building this campaign on research, science, and what builds community. And if it hits those three things, then that's what we're advocating for. So if it means that we move away from refinancing student loan debt at low interest rates to getting rid of student loan debt completely, that's what we're going to move to.
Okay, that's great. So next, you want to do a lot for farms. Mm-hmm. In the rural areas of North Carolina, and I assume the rest of the country, okay, as well. And you talk about our family farms needing much more support, and you want to push for support for farm-to-school programs by encouraging schools to buy local. Mm-hmm. And you want to expand support for small and for medium size farms. Mm-hmm. You want to expand services for new or underserved farmers. And you want to enlist farmers as partners in our efforts to conserve our bountiful natural resources. Mm-hmm. And then you want to support agricultural programs in K through 12 schools and post-secondary institutions. So that all sounds very, very good. There used to be an agency of the federal government that used to do much of that. And it was called the Farmers Home Administration. Mm. And it had huge loan programs, okay, credit programs for communities in the rural areas, and to support housing in the rural areas, and to support but small farmers with loans so that they could get through the growing season also. Mm-hmm. At one point, these loan programs reached a peak of $80 billion. I guess that was something like in 1989, okay, or something like that. Okay, this program did not get through the Clinton period entirely, and also through the Bush period. Went through transitions, but the services were finally entirely destroyed by something like 2004 or 2006, and a vacuum was left, okay, in the rural areas, okay, of our country. So just a thought, maybe restore and expand the farmers' home administration which I believe originated in an early form with the New Deal, okay, and was later killed when we decided the New Deal was over. I don't know what decided that exactly, but anyway. So anyway, just a thought. And of course, I completely agree with all this. I think that our rural areas need to be very strongly supported, especially the infrastructure in the rural areas, including broadband, internet, very, very important things. And you're for marijuana legalization and ending the war on drugs.
Correct.
Would you like to say a few words about that, please?
Well, we have far too long criminalized marijuana and refused to look at its inherent medicinal properties. And I think it's about time for us to read the research and move away from the criminalization of it, legalize it, make sure that it's available to those who choose to use it. It could be a definite cash crop for North Carolina. But we also need to make sure it's available not just commercially, but that people can, grow it themselves if they so choose to. But the sale of it, I would like to see it regulated as far as like a safety aspect of it, just like other food products and or things that people use commercially.
So you want to legalize it and you want to regulate it where there are safety issues involved.
Yeah, I mean, because when we look at it, you just can't grow tobacco and then sell it wherever you want to. It's one of those things that it's a crop, it's a product, and with it being the way it is, I would like to see people be safe with it and know that the product they're using is safe. It's been tested for, it's not got any other drugs or chemicals in it, that, what they're using is a safe product.
Yeah, just common sense measures.
Yeah.
Where the people are using a safe product. Okay. So, move on to women's rights. You're very strong on all the major aspects, of women's rights, I see. Is there anything specific that you'd like to say on that?
Well, I think it's just about time that, women make up a proportional size on all of our legislative bodies, and that with that, we're going to have common sense guidelines and guards against the hijacking of our legislative laws in regards to women and their own choices. We need to make sure that what they want when they want with their own bodies for the betterment of their own families, and just being able to make those decisions autonomously without having a man's approval.
And this is a very big difference between yourself and Virginia Fox, right?
Yeah, absolutely. She puts a capital E on evangelical when it comes to women and their role in society and the family, and she definitely is on the opposite side of supporting women's rights than I am.
Right, and I don't want to unduly emphasize your differences on this issue, because it's very obvious that you're very different from her positions in all the categories we've discussed so far.
Right.
This one. So when we get to the LGBTQ category, here's another one in which you're vastly different.
Right.
But from the person that you are running to replace, you want a standard of complete equality and policies that ban discrimination against LGBTQ persons by credit lenders and financial institutions. You want to reduce suicides and promote programs that reduce the bullying and the harassment in schools. And I take it you're saying reduce in both of those categories only because the complete elimination of those things is impossible.
Right. You can't be in every place in every space to ensure that people are treated fairly. But as a public school teacher, I always try to build that community within my students. But there were always times when we, and as good as we were to look for bullying and hateful behavior, it still happened. We dealt with it when we found it. But with our most at-risk communities, our LGBTQ folks, we really need to make sure that we are promoting programs that build community, build bridges, and really reduce the suicide rate, one, reduce bullying in schools, and lead us to more tolerant viewpoints in regards to people. I also do advocate, like you said, for the addition of their class to the federally protected class of people. So that would give them legal protections under the law. So yeah. I think this is the time that we need to be doing that.
Yeah, me too. So moving on to infrastructure, your ideas there are also very strong. What size program do you see in terms of the costs that would be necessary to give us an infrastructure that was first rate, again, comparable to the other best infrastructures in the world?
Yeah, it's going to take trillions of dollars, because we have neglected our infrastructure for so long that we are at critical mass in lots of aspects of it. Just in the 5th District alone, just 3,500 square miles, we have 1,700 dams that are at the high risk of failure. And a lot of these are privately owned. They were built back in the 40s and 50s, so they're quite old. And rather than trying to deal with the catastrophic event when one of them breaks, we need to start fixing them. It's cheaper to do this, investment up front, but we have not been doing that. We've not been updating our roads. We've not been updating our airports. We've not been updating bridges. And now we're starting to see the effects of that. And so it's going to be more costly if we just keep putting it off.
But it looks like the cost could be as high as $600 billion a year in order to complete a program like this in, let's say, 6 years.
Yeah.
And that's what we're talking about, aren't we?
Yeah, absolutely. Plus, it gives people jobs.
Right.
We have to have these people that are going to be from the community, building in their community, not just these public-private partnerships where some company just whiffs into town, is here to fix your bridges, does, frankly, a half-assed job of it, and then leaves with
gets out of town very nice as quickly as they can, right?
Yep.
Okay, I agree certainly with that. I suppose I want to point out that there might be some overlap between the job guarantee program and the infrastructure program. And insofar, as that occurs, it would reduce the total cost, of both programs together. Mm-hmm. And I don't know the impact of that. It all depends upon where the infrastructure category ends and where the job guarantee category ends. If there's an
Right.
then the cost estimates would change.
Mm-hmm.
On the environment, we have one Earth, and we must take care of it. Absolutely. Investing in clean energy resources, increasing sustainable building and clean air, soil, and water protections. And that's another area that overlaps to some degree with the infrastructure program area and the job guarantee area, because the way
Right.
job guarantee is often conceived now is that there would be green jobs.
Right.
So that overlaps as well. But of course, here you're emphasizing ban on fracking and eliminating the EPA fracking loophole for oil and gas companies, reinstate the Superfund tax structure so that the cleanup doesn't fall on the citizens but falls on the industries that actually created it. You're for passing a renewable electricity standard, setting binding targets for renewable energy in near and long term to diversify the electricity generation mix, save consumers money, and reduce pollution. All that sounds very sensible.
Mm-hmm.
And certainly those goals are progressive goals. We talked about healthcare already. You have also views on the military. You don't say much about the use of military, but you do say that if we're going to send our brothers and sisters off to war, we have to be willing to take care of their needs when they get home.
Mm-hmm.
That includes both physical, and mental health. And you mentioned the suicide rate, unacceptable. And you point out we can't continue to ignore the pleas of our veterans for help. And of course, I entirely agree with that too. You want to expand the VA hospital benefits and include comprehensive dental care. And you want to provide excellent counseling in the mental health area and family assistance and transition assistance, all of which I also agree with. And you want to increase also military pensions and housing benefits.
Mm-hmm.
And I certainly agree with most with those things too. Just to say this, I think how we treat our veterans has been a scandal. It's just the sheer disconnect between the lip service and the reality is simply staggering and shameful. And I agree fully with your wanting to support the military in this way. And compared to other things that we're spending on now or are going to spend on, this would be a fairly minimal cost. No reason in the world why we shouldn't be undertaking it. It's always been completely incomprehensible to me that we spend so much on the war machine itself and so little on our people who have served.
Yes.
So getting now to money, politics, and the electoral process. You, of course, want to get money out of politics. And you're going to push for publicly financed, transparent systems of campaign financing. You want to end gerrymandering and ensure open primaries everywhere. Expand early voting, vote by mail, restore the full protections of the Voting Rights Act. You want to have automatic voter registration and same-day registration, and you want to move to ranked choice voting, right?
Yes.
And you want publicly financed, transparent system of campaign financing and complete transparency regarding the funding of campaigns, including thorough disclosure of the contributions, and a ban on the revolving door between Congress and the lobbyists. Okay. I'd like to see all those things too, and your statement of them is extremely comprehensive. Okay, but of course, to get some of this done, or a lot of this done, we'll have to get by CU in some way. In other words, we'll have to basically prohibit the corporate contributions in spite of the Supreme Court.
Yeah, exactly. We need to deal with Citizens United and subsequent rulings. But I think at this point, if we get enough people in Congress that look at Citizens United in a critical and probably negative way, we could get some things moving in the right direction.
Okay. Okay. Do you know the exceptions clause of the Constitution in Article 3, Section 2?
Not off the top of my head, no.
Okay. What it does is it states in a short phrase at the end of Article 3, Section 2. Article 3 is the article that deals with the judicial branch.
Okay.
What it says in Article 3, Section 2 in the short phrase, okay, it mentions a number of different things concerning the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court. And there's a short phrase that says, but Congress has the authority to limit the jurisdiction of the appeals courts of the United States. Supreme Court of the United States is an appeals court. That's all, okay, that it's empowered to do, okay, is to hear appeals from the findings, okay, of some of the lower courts. CU was an appeals decision. If there were other laws passed that contradicted CU, and it had the exceptions clause inside of those laws, the Supreme Court would not have the authority to review the laws and to declare them unconstitutional. If there was a law passed, a single law, that basically just said, we're re-empowering all the previous campaign finance laws prior to the date of the CU decision. And we put the exceptions clause in that. The Supreme Court would be powerless to do anything about that. And all the previous campaign finance laws would again be valid. So this is something that could be done by a progressive Congress, which would require only a majority vote. Of course, to cast this in stone, to enshrine it, it would be necessary to pass an amendment to the Constitution. Right. Of course, in order to prevent the conservatives from coming in and, simply repealing these laws. Yeah. Right. But that would be a way to gain the time needed to pass a constitutional amendment. So anyway, I wanted to say that. So you just have that thought in your head. You have some very strong statements on racial justice here. You want to address the specific needs of communities of color overwhelmingly affected by police violence and political and legal disenfranchisement, disenfranchisement, and environmental injustice. And you're committed to collaborating with communities of color to enforce solutions that will contribute to more equal and just society. And I take it that you mean by that, in part at least, the prosecution of the police officers who have been committing violence against people from communities of color.
Right, right.
And you're going to push for mandatory racial bias training for police departments to address unjust racial profiling and police brutality targeting people of color. And you want to demilitarize our police forces and mandate also body cameras to hold the police accountable. We want to re-enfranchise the more than 2 million African Americans who've had their right to vote taken away by a felony conviction, often a felony conviction for such
marijuana
possession,
yeah.
which in that case was marijuana possession.
Right, absolutely.
Okay. So millions of people can't vote because they were possessing marijuana.
Right.
It's incredible. So you want to ensure equal pay for people, for people of color. That's something the job guarantee would really help with, because, of course, in the job guarantee program, there would be equal pay. And if there was not equal pay in the private industry, then that would represent a problem for private industry in terms of getting people. So, and you want to put an end to the unequal exposure of people of color to harmful chemicals, pesticides, and other toxins in homes, schools, neighborhoods, and workplaces. Yeah, that is really awful. See an end to that also. So I think that's a very strong plank when it comes to racial justice. Okay, and I commend you for it. And then you have an immigration platform, and you want a Clean Dream Act, which would provide a permanent solution for 2.1 million immigrant youth and young adults who came to the U.S. as children but currently have no pathways to citizenship. Of course, the obvious question for me to ask at this point, which I'm going to ask, is why not simply declare them as citizens? They've grown up here. They're effectively Americans. Why not?
Well, that's the whole point of the Clean Dream Act, is to let them go through the process of naturalization. That's the process we have in place. That's what's expected, and that's, I think, what we need to do.
But the process of naturalization is a 6 to 7 year process.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Quickly and transparently doing it in a way that isn't that 6 to 7 year, very costly program. And frankly, we need to clean that one up as well. It shouldn't take that long to go through the naturalization process.
Okay, so basically what you have in mind for this is a situation where they would go down to the proper place and be sworn in as citizens of the United States.
Basically, yeah. You just can't not like, oh, today everybody's a citizen. You need to still file the appropriate paperwork, make sure, let them have the ability to choose their name if they want to. That's the same process with naturalization. Give them all the legal rights to go through the process like everyone else does, but expedite it, make it, just cover the basic costs of getting it done, rather than the $800 or $900 it costs to do your naturalization paperwork and the years that it takes. Do it quickly, because they don't need to take the English test. They've been living here. I mean, they've gone to school here. They're working here. They just need to get their proper paperwork done, get naturalized, so they have all the legal rights as citizens. And then nobody can take that away. And that's the goal.
Okay, and how about the soldiers? Okay, who've been in the service, okay, and who have come home. I mean, we have a situation now where the immigrants come home and then sometimes are deported.
Oh yeah, we need to let those people come back, become citizens. They went to the military because they love our country. They went into the military because they believe in America. And when we decided that we no longer wanted or needed them, we deported them. Oftentimes for like minor offenses. And we need to make sure that those people can come back home, to the place that they do call home, and make sure that they have the opportunity to become citizens. And if you serve in the military, I think that's one way that you should be able to fast track yourself to citizenship.
Yes. Okay, and you have a number of other items on your program that are looking very good. Okay, I'm not going to read through those. I do want to briefly cover your the Wall Street reforms that you have in mind. You say Wall Street was responsible for the loss of people's life savings, housing, and jobs, and the CEOs of our financial institutions were not punished because they were deemed too big to fail. And you say you understand the failure to hold Wall Street accountable for almost destroying our economy must be prevented in the future. And you're going to push for supporting regulations for Wall Street with a modern version of Glass-Steagall and regulating credit default swaps. So in other words, you want to revise the Financial Commodity Modernization Act. What you'd like to do is to repeal and replace that with something that regulates the credit default swaps very closely.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, we need to take the risk out of regular banking, consumer banking.
Okay, and you want to protect the Consumer Protection Financial Bureau and introduce a tax on Wall Street speculation. And you want to implement harsher penalties on white-collar crime, including jail time for financial executives. Okay, I think certainly that is very good. What would you do to ensure that such a reform was enforced? Because it was within the power, of the last of Jeffrey Holder. Yes.
Yeah, Eric Holder. Yeah. And he did nothing.
Eric Holder. Yes, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Not Jeffrey Holder. Yeah. Not Jeffrey Holder. Okay, but Eric Holder.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, it was within his power. Okay, and that of the president.
Right.
Who have done something about that. They chose not to enforce the existing laws at the time. So, how can we ensure that the laws are enforced and that the white-collar criminals do pay the price so that we don't have the moral hazard again?
Right. I mean, I'm not sure if I have a well-reasoned answer to that question. It's one of those things that I think needs to be figured out. But Congress needs to make sure that the laws that they write are being enforced. And if that means a congressional oversight, I'm not sure what would need to happen, but something needs to happen when our laws are not being obeyed. And when it's up to the president and the Department of Justice, they need to do their job. And if they don't do their job, they need to be held accountable. And whatever that means, we need to do it. Because they walked away.
In this context, it might actually require a narrowing of the prosecutorial discretion.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, it's that power of the prosecutors to select among cases to say, I'm going to pursue these, but I'm not going to pursue those.
Yeah.
And that was
we have that problem across the country at local levels, at state levels, and at the federal level. That this idea that you just mentioned about the discretion that a prosecutor has to try a case or not to try a case is really, it is both good and bad at the same time, because you don't want to punish somebody for doing something that really didn't need to be punished for, because it was a crime that was committed without kind of like, really like impetus of like really being a criminal. But then there are crimes that are committed that really need to be prosecuted and they don't. And it's very frustrating. And how do we corral that is the thing. And yeah, narrowing the ability of the prosecutor to wiggle out of, really, going after a conviction would be one way of doing that. Absolutely.
Right. But also, if we're going to do that, since there are resource questions, very important ones, that are involved in this, we might also have to increase the funding of the by law enforcement agencies to give them the capacity to actually try cases that are going to be expensive. Mm-hmm. The financial criminals, their companies are behind them, and they themselves are rich. Often the government lawyers find themselves in a difficult situation. Mm-hmm. And that's in part due to the resources, that they are able to bring to bear compared to the resources the financial community is able to bring to bear, in order to defend itself. But that's right. Quite a lot of this has to do with the personnel who are appointed. In the case of Bill Black, he was very instrumental in the prosecution of the savings and loan criminals. And he and the team that he worked with got 1,000 convictions at the time and sent those people to jail. And after that happened, he was persona non grata in Washington after that, and he hasn't been able to get a job in Washington since that time. He's a professor today and probably has an easier life, but at the same time, if we really wanted to ensure, that the law was enforced, then he's the kind of person who needs to get appointed as the Attorney General of the United States. Mm-hmm. Obviously, a lot of this really depends on who you appoint as the Attorney General of the United States. And if you're going to appoint a corporate lawyer, you can expect a certain kind of enforcement of the law. And if you're going to appoint someone with different training, then you might get a different standard, okay, of enforcement.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, there's one remaining thing, okay, that I'd like to get to, and I'm sure that's all that we're going to have time for, and that is we've talked about a lot of expensive programs.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody is going to ask you somewhere along the way,
how do we pay for it?
how you pay for it. So how are you going to answer that question?
Well, we have a $770 billion defense budget. Do we really need that much military industrial spending?
No.
No.
So say we cut that down by 50%.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and now we had a $380 billion defense budget.
Right.
So we have $380 billion more to spend on the infrastructure program, the job guarantee program, the climate change program, the education program, the Medicare for All program, and all the other things we talked about here tonight. The $380 billion isn't going to do it.
No, but we also have a tax system that's not set up for really making sure that our dollars are flowing through our economy the way they should be. It's the wealthy are sticking their money in bank accounts in the Cayman Islands and not spending it. Because frankly, consumers, regular ordinary people making $35,000, $40,000 a year is the way that our economy runs. It is not Jeff Bezos and all his $1 billion, because he can only buy so much stuff. We need consumers.
I completely agree with you, but I've seen estimates that if you restored the tax rates, the income tax rates,
mm-hmm.
To the levels that we had during the Eisenhower administration, when the marginal tax rates, okay, were at 90% for the very wealthy, and you collected all those taxes, it still would not amount. So it might amount to $300 or $400 billion more,
mm-hmm.
but it's still not going to pay for all the things we have to do.
But the federal government doesn't run like a state government. It's the maker of its own currency. So right. I mean, we're the guarantor of the payments of all of these programs. So I mean, it comes down to if we value it, we'll fund it. We'll make sure that the money's there. We'll make sure that the resources are there. And frankly, we're not 1920 Germany, and without the resources to make sure that our products are being made, and people are being employed, and there are things to buy, and that's, I think that if I understand it right, that's how it works.
Okay, so Jenny Marshall, you are somebody who knows how to pay for it. Okay, okay, but I would like to put up something here.
Sure.
And sort of show you something. Okay, and I'm going to give this the whole screen. There's the question.
There you go. We're Congress.
Expensive. How are you going to pay for it? Yeah, we're Congress. We'll just order the Fed to give Treasury the money. So that's no joke. It really could be done. Okay, and
that's how we fund Social Security. It's a law that's written, and it's based on the fact that we've decided to pay out that money. Isn't that correct?
That's absolutely correct, and that's really the way, okay, that it's done. But there's something else involved which distorts how it's done, and that is when we spend $650 billion worth on Social Security, okay, in any given year, the Social Security trust fund. It isn't really a trust fund. I mean, not
Sure.
sense that the accounting record.
Yes, the line item in the book.
Yeah, the line item in the books is marked down by $650 billion.
Right.
That need not be the case. There's no reason why it should be the case, except for a fiction which has lasted for many, many years. But that is what happens, as well as Congress ordering it.
Mm-hmm.
So one thing we could ensure is that actually doesn't happen anymore. Okay, that is not an issue, that there's no obligation to mark down the trust fund account.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, here's some language that would actually go into bills. Now, this is called overt congressional financing. Okay, if you want to put a technical term on it.
Mm-hmm.
And these two clauses are all that would have to be included, okay, in any appropriations bill. I shouldn't say these two clauses. It's only one clause here, but there are two sentences to the clause. So these two sentences. The first sentence gives something more similar to actual sort of, of legislative language, okay, which would be used in a bill. And the first sentence deals with the Federal Reserve giving the Treasury the money to spend the mandate in the appropriations bill that it gets from the Congress. And the second sentence is for the Federal Reserve to provide the Treasury Department of the money it needs to repay the portion of the debt subject to the limit which is falling due during the period of the appropriations bill. So in other words, with these two sentences, the spending appropriated would be taken care of, and the spending that we know is going to be necessary to repay the debt instruments would also be given to the Treasury. So guess what? There would be no need for the Treasury to issue any more debt instruments, which means that if you put this language in an appropriations bill, within 6 months, about $4 trillion in short-term debt and other debt that was falling due would be repaid. And the people who keep telling us about the $21.5 trillion debt we have now, or the 21 trillion, I can't exactly keep track of it, that these people would suddenly have only a $17 trillion debt to talk about after 6 months. So it would be very visible to all concerned that the debt subject to the limit was always a faux problem, because it was a problem that was getting solved by just these two sentences in the appropriations bill. So if one did this, then it would be something that would destroy the whole industry devoted to terrorism over the debt that stands in the way of the progressives in Washington. If there was some great victory for the progressives now, and this was put into the appropriations bill in, let's say, 2019, and got through the president because he really couldn't afford to shut down the government, okay, at that time, and he was forced to swallow it, okay. So then what would happen is, by the time of the election in 2020, the debt issue would be gone, and you would not have to face a Peterson Foundation or network, okay, of think tanks, which was on your back because you increased the federal debt as a result of deficit spending by $3 trillion. Okay. In other words, that issue would be gone because the deficit spending would have been paid for without having to issue any more debt. and the total debt would be much smaller than it had been at the time you took office. So you and the progressives could point to that and say, we were never really worried about the debt because we always thought it was a false issue. But since many of the American people were very worried about it, we decided to show you how easily it could be handled. And so we passed this, and now look, presto changeo, we only owe 15 trillion now. As I say 15 trillion because it wouldn't be 6 months anymore. In other words, if you went through a whole term this way, it would probably be down to 15 trillion, okay, at that time. Something like that. Those are estimates off the top of my head. I wouldn't actually swear by those estimates, but I'm pretty sure they're more or less in the ballpark as to how low it would go, okay, within a year or two. Of course, to pay off the whole thing would take actually 30 years because the longest term debt is a 30-year note. So it's important that the debt not be paid off sooner than it's due. Okay, because if you just keep to the schedule of payoffs, then there are no inflationary forces due to financing things in this way. It would be neutral, okay, as far as inflation is concerned. But if you paid off the whole debt, okay, in 1 year, that might be an inflationary act. Could be done with using the same technique, but it would not be wise to do that. So I wanted to give you that about language, okay, especially the first very, very short answer. Hey, we're the Congress. We can order the Fed to do that. That's the way we're going to pay for it. And I also wanted to warn you that once you give that answer, then all kinds of people are going to jump out of their the chairs and say you're going to cause hyperinflation. So you have to have an answer ready about why that's not going to cause any inflation at all.
Right.
I can give you that answer, but that's for another occasion, I think, not for this one. So we've gone now for 1 hour and 54 minutes or so. Would you like to say something in closing and give us your donation button?
Sure. Well, it's been a pleasure being on here with you, and who are using research, are believing science, who understand, I guess, the basics, and I'm still learning the basics of how finance works at the federal level, and really using that knowledge to empower our communities, empower our states, and empower our country to do better for more people, and to really make sure that we are lifting people up rather than just the select few. So if you want to help our campaign, obviously it's 110% grassroots funded, and you can make a donation at marshallforhouse.org. And you can find the donate button on the front page and click it. There's all different kinds of ways to donate through a credit card, through ActBlue, through PayPal, or you can just send me a regular old check. Those are the best. I tell people all the time, if you want to really help a campaign, send them a check through the mail, because 100% of that money goes right towards the campaign. Nobody's taking a slice of that donation. But yeah, campaigns run on donations and volunteers, and if you can't volunteer, donate.
Okay, so one final question for you.
Okay.
And that final question is, would it be fair to say, I only asked this question, okay, because of the audience we have tonight.
Okay.
But would it be fair to say that you are an MMT candidate?
I would say I'd lean towards that. I understand like the ideas of that. I haven't been able to like fully delve into it, but understanding how our system of government works with the changing of, just eliminate this line item here and just moving it over to here, kind of did blow my mind when I started to look at it fully. And having good conversations with Pavlina has definitely opened up my my viewpoint on how Social Security works. And so you don't definitely want to get into that kind of conversation with people who don't understand or don't have the time to learn the basics. My primary opponent is a person who says our tax dollars fund Social Security, and I'm like sitting there going, no, they don't. No, they don't. It's legislative, So, it's like one of those things that it's like when you can and if you can tell people the real truth about how our country really funds and pays for the programs that we have, how we decide who gets what and when, and it really is going to be up to the people of this country, the people within the districts, electing progressives who believe that we should spend our money in a way that empowers our community.
Right, but it's also true that if we go to this, okay, that if you implement this, then whatever the truth was in the past, once you pass this, then it is going to be true. That taxes will not, at that point, actually fund spending any longer. Whatever the truth was in the past,
right?
Won't be even to argue about that anymore, because now it's done with that.
I wish we had a video series that I could just take around. I know, I think Stephanie Kelton has a little bit of one, and Pavlina has a little bit of some, but it'd be really good to really have a good talk about how our country funds the programs that we fund, and why it doesn't work like your own household budget.
Yes. It's not really as complicated as it might be at first blush. The way I like to approach it is first with the Constitution. I point to Article 1, Section 8, and say Congress has the authority to spend. And the spending done by the Treasury, and by the Federal Reserve, both are done by those agencies under delegation of the authority Congress has. So basically, it all comes from the Congress. It's all based on the orders of the Congress. It's all based on the appropriations bills.
Right.
It's all based on the other rules made by the Congress that the Treasury and the Fed have to follow. So that's really the whole truth of it. Okay. So if we say that what we tax is not for spending, but in order to drain money out of the economy, and if we say that what we spend is through the orders that we give to Treasury and that we give to the Federal Reserve, then that's it. I mean, that's the truth of the matter. So anyway, that is one way to approach it. Okay, but I agree. We do need something very simple and very transparent. There are a lot of people trying to produce that kind of a video where in something in 15 minutes, the essential could be given to people in
we need a schoolhouse rock version of how the federal government works.
And I think our group, the Real Progressives group, is trying to produce that. We have so many YouTubes, and videos, that out there now. We're trying to find clips, from various ones to string together, to create with this kind of a tutorial in a very, very short space.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, thank you very much for coming and
Yeah, thank you.
for the conversation. Okay, so I'm going to say good night now. Okay, and
All right.
take you broadcast. Okay, and let you get some rest.
All right. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Bye. So everyone, that was Jenny Marshall, and as far as I'm concerned, you have an MMT candidate there. And the reason why I say so is she's for the job guarantee. She knows the truth concerning the way Social Security is paid for and other things, okay, are paid for. And she knows how to pay for the things that she wants to do. And those are the essential things that an MMT candidate has to know. Okay, seems to me. So what should be apparent is that she is one of ours, a very progressive platform, okay, and also a platform that's been proposed by someone who knows how to pay for it and who knows how to answer that question in a plausible way. So I have to close in my usual way now and say thank you very much for coming, and remind you that Real Progressives has a Patreon account, and that we would like you to occasionally contribute to our Patreon account if you are so moved. Okay, and that I have a Patreon account as well. Okay, and I make the same appeal. Okay, but only when you can afford it and when you are so moved. So thank you very much for coming and for staying for so long. I love you all, I really do. And I love to spend time with you. So I'll see you next time. I'll see you on Tuesday when I interview, let me see. When I am interviewing Dimitri Cherney. After all, some of you have asked for Dimitri Cherney to come back, and he is coming back, okay, at 8 o'clock on Tuesday with me. So on that note, I'm going to end our broadcast and say good night. Thank you very much.